Good morning. We are gathered here this morning to make a statement and to set forth an action, and I am pleased to be flanked by so many clergy people here today and some presidents of the North Carolina NAACP, some of the state officials, as well as Equality North Carolina, who are joining me here this morning. After a weekend of football where black and white gladiators risked injury on every play, throwing their bodies at each other to entertain millions watching on flat screens, after a long weekend when many stuffed themselves with all of the trimmings that Thanksgiving brings. After a long weekend where so-called news media gave millions of dollars of free advertising to big box stores to promote consumerism's new unholy day, Black Friday, I am compelled to bring in the civil rights movement's holy season of December and January with this message.
All right.
The North Carolina Council of Churches honored me by making me its president last January. In early October, I received a greater honor when the thousands of anti-racism warriors of the North Carolina NAACP sent delegates to the state conference to elect me to be their president.
Amen.
It is with great humility that I enter the political arena, not as a gladiator playing hurtful games against my brothers and sisters for the bemusement of rich speculators, but as a man of peace,
That's right.
Yes,
as a
sir.
man of justice,
Yes.
as a man of love,
Sir.
mercy, and grace.
Yes.
Say it. Say it.
I know as the new black leader in the arena, especially in a time when the United States government is collapsing before our very eyes,
Talk about
All
it.
right.
and in a time when an all-white caucus, which hijacked Mr. Lincoln's Republican Party
That's right.
and sees absolutely nothing wrong with locking out legislators of color from their meetings to come up with vicious legislation
Yes.
to attack and hurt workers, minorities,
Yes.
LGBTQ people, immigrants, the people Jesus called the least of these.
That's
Yes.
We, the North Carolina NAACP, come with a different view of holy days,
Yes.
a different view of our duty as members of God's human family.
All right.
The slave masters and the school boards for our first 300 years tried to keep us from learning to read and write.
Yes, sir.
But our ancestors taught us how to count.
That's it.
We know we are a minority in a democracy where you need 50% plus one
All right.
to win any vote.
Yes. Yes.
We can't win a majority if we stick to mere arithmetic.
Uh-huh.
But our parents, our moral math teachers, taught us addition and multiplication,
Go ahead.
and even more than that, taught us to hold fast to God's mathematics.
All right.
As it is written, he who gathered much had no excess,
Yes.
Yes, sir.
and he who gathered little had no shortfall.
That's right.
We can multiply our numbers when we take the moral path.
Teach.
When we take the path that pleases our Creator,
Yes.
we gain the higher ground.
That's right.
All right.
We are at a historic fork in the road.
That's
Yes,
right.
sir.
If we don't learn to live together as Dr. King taught us,
Uh-huh.
together we will die like fools.
That's right.
In 1916, when great colonial powers were being drawn into a war to end all wars by a bunch of fools, a killing war that left millions dead
Teach.
and millions of survivors full of fear and vengeful hatred.
Yes.
Say it.
Robert Frost, a New England man, wrote one of his most loved poems.
Go ahead.
Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by.
Go ahead.
I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference.
Yes, sir.
Today, our world, our nation, and our state enters the holy season for civil rights movement people. In the year Christ Jesus was born, Caesar issued some oppressive decrees. Quirinius carried them out, and Joseph, who had no frame of reference for what democracy looked like, had no choice but to conform to the system. In this season, we must lift our eyes unto the hills from whence cometh our help. We must decide which road to take, the well-worn road of expedience or the one less traveled by. The road less traveled will not be a trouble-free road. Nobody said it was going to be easy. The road less traveled leads to a place beyond personal agendas. The road less traveled leads to a place beyond party affiliation. The road less traveled leads to a moral place, an ethical place, a righteous place. It leads to a higher place. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. chose the road less traveled when a year before his death, he broke with President Lyndon Baines Johnson. Dr. King turned the full weight of his moral authority and clear voice against the United States intervention in the Vietnam Civil War. President Johnson was incensed. He reached out to carefully vetted black leaders and told them to speak out against Dr. King in a clumsy attempt to split them off from the growing consensus of many members of LBJ's party. That U.S. involvement was both stupid and wrong. A year later, LBJ decided not to run for president in 1968. A week later, Dr. King, having pulled together people of all colors across the nation for a national poor people's campaign during the historic 1968 presidential campaign, was murdered by white terror on a Memphis hotel balcony. This unleashed the racial turbulence and condoned official racism that is so evident in our hurting nation today. During the turbulent 1970s, Bishop Stephen Gill Spotswood of the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church was named the board chair of the NAACP. And he chose the road less traveled when Richard Nixon welcomed the good people in the Klan into the new Republican Party. Bishop Spotswood refused to mince his message and stirred up a political storm, calling out Nixon's Southern strategy of creating an all-white caucus to take over the vulnerable Republican Party's apparatus. Bishop Spotswood's truths were too much for his fellow Bishop Charles Eubank Tucker and other old warriors who could not give up on Lincoln's Republican Party. We are today in the center of similar, perhaps greater political storms. Today's storms with high winds and flooding waters beat repeatedly and vociferously upon economic sustainability. These vicious storms wash out the guaranteed educational opportunities for our children. These storms compromise the health care of the elderly and the poor. They cloud our vision and the enactment of proven policies to begin to clear righteous paths through the jungle of criminal justice. And today, as we enter the holy season, which for most great religions centers around the challenge of creating systems of justice, most of our nation's leaders still refuse to address the black community with equity. Is it because African Americans are only 13% of America's electorate? Is it because in North Carolina we are only 23% of the North Carolina electorate? How is it that an overwhelming majority of defendants who are found to be wrongfully arrested, tried, and convicted of crimes are black men? Did you know that 47% of the 1,900 exonerees in the National Registry of Exonerations as of a year ago were black men? North Carolina, did you know the great majority of more than 1,800 other men found to be framed and imprisoned in 15 large-scale police scandals
Go ahead.
were black men.
Black man.
Our criminal justice system appears to every citizen who knows the story of Jesus' encounter with Roman justice,
That's right.
that whether you are hanged on a cross
Yeah.
or from a tree,
Yeah.
All right.
the whole system needs a major overhaul.
Major overhaul. Major overhaul.
The NAACP is charged with keeping the public aware of the adverse effects of discrimination.
Yes.
We're charged with securing the elimination of racial discrimination and to seek legislation and policies at the same state level toward that end.
Yes.
It is in this spirit that we seek a continuing dialogue with leaders in Raleigh
Yes.
Yes.
of all
yes.
three branches
Yes, sir.
All
to
three
propose the implementation of an equitable criminal justice commission.
That's right.
The questions of discrimination in the business of plea bargaining,
All right.
the business of death, and the business of criminalizing school misconduct
Yeah.
must be addressed.
That's right.
I have asked our legal team to separate out the delicate issue of Dante Sharp,
Yes, sir.
Yes.
whose indomitable spirit of innocence has been caged in the North Carolina prison system for nearly 25 years,
25 years.
challenging the plea bargaining system that is not equipped to deal with pleas of not guilty.
That's right.
I visited Dante a couple of weeks ago. His resolve is righteous, and his tenacity is tremendous.
Yes, sir.
And we invite any reporter or government official to visit Dante.
That's right.
His moral leadership is greatly needed in our fatherless black communities, where our young men seek respect from other young men a few years older,
Yeah.
who have yet to reach manhood, much less even ever having left the hood.
That's right.
The following letter has already been hand delivered this morning to the leaders of the three branches.
Go ahead.
Allow me to read that letter. Dear leaders of the three co-equal branches of the North Carolina government,
Yes, sir.
in order to get my bearings
Yes.
as the newly elected leader of the North Carolina NAACP
Okay.
and as the president of the North Carolina Council of Churches,
Yes.
I respectfully request the pleasure of a meeting with you as we prepare our plans for 2018.
Yes.
The NAACP will be 109 years old on February 12th, 2018.
My.
And I know you are aware of its bulldog reputation.
Yes, sir.
All right.
We exist for one purpose and one purpose alone: to eliminate racial discrimination
Yes.
and prejudice from our society.
That's right. That's right.
Today, while our nation and state are in the midst of great political turbulence, caused at least in part by racist voting
Yes.
and criminal justice policies and practices, there is a great need for honest political leaders to speak directly with each other and to listen carefully across the table of civility.
That's
Yes,
right.
sir.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
We have carefully tracked the public policies the North Carolina government has promoted and how they impacted minorities, working, and poor people for a long time.
That's right.
As you know, we have over 100 branches across the state,
Yes.
including several in the Appalachian region. We have friends on every college campus,
That's right.
and we have active relationships with over 200 organizations and churches that work with us as we seek to repair the breaches
Yes.
in God's human family.
That's right.
All right.
We believe that constructive working relationships are best built by working on issues where there is much agreement.
Yes, sir.
We know that the executive, judicial, and legislative branches have shown some interest in seeking new approaches to overhaul the criminal injustice system.
That's
Yes.
good.
Yes.
That's
There
right.
is a growing feeling on the part of minorities
Yes.
that the police and the courthouse are against them.
That's right.
We get complaints every day to that effect. The fact that people call us rather than elected officials at the local level is more than a canary warning.
Yes.
All right.
It is a scream of despair that local and state systems of justice do not equally protect our people.
That's right.
Perhaps we can arrange meetings to discuss this issue and explore other issues our members are concerned with.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
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 sir.
yes.
In the
yes.
spirit of the holy season, please call our office
Yes.
by December 15th, 2007,
Yes, sir.
if you are open to such discussions. Yours in the struggle, T. Anthony Spearman.
That's all right.
Amen.
All right, all right.
Amen. Amen.
We
Amen.
thank you
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you.
for your attention to this matter. We thank
Yes.
you for your attendance
Yes.
here at this press conference. We will now open up to the media for questions. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
Reverend Spearman, assuming that Chief Justice Martin, Speaker of the House Moore, President Pro Tem Berger, and Governor Cooper do not share the spirit of the season,
My.
and thus ignore your invitation for everyone to sit down and to speak, what are you prepared to do then? And would part of that preparation be to once again bring thousands of people from all over the state to Raleigh or wherever, but specifically to Raleigh, as per Moral Monday, and show that there are people who indeed would like to see these four come to the table and at least break bread?
Yes. Thank you for that question, Brother Cash Michaels, and we are hopeful that there will be a response to the letter by the 15th of December, but you can mark me by this, that should we not receive anything, that we are geared up to move forward, as we have been doing, to do rallies, whatever needs to be done for such a time as this. Other questions?
Father,
Yes, sir.
Since you have the Chief Justice on here, I'm not sure if you've addressed this before, but are there specific concerns about what has been reported that the legislature, that the Republican-led legislature is planning as it relates to judicial redistricting or merit selections per 2018, that in effect that they're literally ripping everything apart pretty much, and they want to take control of the state's judiciary. And so by the time we get to the 2018 elections, we may be looking at a situation that we never dreamed of ever seeing before, as far as our judiciary is concerned.
Yes. There was a previous press conference that was done around that very matter of the attacks on the judiciary. And we have our eyes also on that. And so this is one of the reasons why we wanted the Chief Justice to be included in the three branches, so that we can make sure that as we come together, we're making all aware of the things that we are concerned about and how we hope that they will be addressed by all of the branches of government.
So could you reiterate then what you said earlier in regard to this, to the legislative leaders?
With regard to the judiciary, the attacks, well, one of the things that we spoke to was how we are extremely disconcerted with the manner in which they choose to move forward by reducing the terms of the judiciary.
Yes.
and those things, trying to move them from 8 years to 2 years in some cases, and in other cases when they change this, and this happens this year, that there'll be a total great expense levied on all of those who have to run again for office.
Yes.
So we're trying to be comprehensive in our approach with it, and just looking to see what's going to happen next.
And one last question. With 2018 being a midterm election again, and the African-American vote in particular, not popular when it comes to coming out for midterms. We like to vote during presidential elections, but for some reason, we don't come out in too many numbers when it comes to midterms. I'm sure that North Carolina NAACP will have emphasis on voting for 2018, but will there be any special emphasis given how important 2018 is as it relates to getting out the vote?
Most definitely. One of the first pieces of the platform that I have put forth is making sure that we respect our vote, and we're prayerful that the NAACP, the branches, are going to be further stimulated to get into their respective neighborhoods where they have branches, and to be able to engage with the people who are the most marginalized, to do all that we can to educate them and to provide all kinds of things educationally that will help them to give up their lackadaisical approach to voting.
And will the black church have a role in that?
Most definitely. And you see me flanked by all of these pastors and presiding elders, and
That's why I asked.
oh yes, sir. Most definitely, they will be heavily involved and heavily engaged in the work and making sure that it's all facilitated. Thank you for your questions.
Yes, sir.
We really appreciate it. Are there any others? Well, thank you for gathering today, and we really appreciate your coming here this afternoon or this morning.
Amen. Amen.
Everybody, yeah.
Yes.